I'm Melanie McQuaid and you're watching Racergirl television. Today we're going to do some baking. I'm going to show you a recipe for pumpkin chocolate chip bread, which is a super easy, beginner-friendly, fantastically delicious recipe that anybody can make. You need a limited amount of tools to actually make this, and generally the results are always good. The recipe I'm about to show you is not gluten-free. Although the recipe is half spelt flour and half white flour, spelt flour still has gluten in it. In order to change this recipe to gluten-free, the ratio of all the ingredients would be much different than what I'm showing you. So I think you'll have limited success if you just substitute gluten-free flour. But using spelt flour or non-wheat based flour often helps some people who are just sort of sensitive to wheat. I'm making this recipe for the guys at the Trek Pro City store, and they prefer their bread to be super tasty and have lots of gluten in it. So this is actually the most delicious way you could have this recipe. It's not actually altered that much from what Grandma used to make. But feel free to go through the ingredients that are in this recipe and adjust it according to what's right for you. The details of the recipe are on my website at racergirl.com. And during the show, I'll just basically go through the steps with you and show you what the batter is supposed to look like and the kinds of ingredients that you should be using. And hopefully you'll get this right on your first try. So, let's get started. The ingredients I'm using in this recipe are some white flour, some stone ground spelt flour, chocolate chips, baking powder, brown sugar, and this is important, pure pumpkin. You don't want to be using pumpkin pie mix in this recipe, so make sure you've got pure pumpkin, some butter, and nutmeg and cinnamon, and lastly some eggs. I'm using a big stand mixer today because I'm using butter in the recipe. You can substitute oil for the butter in this recipe, and it changes the density of the actual bread. Instead of being sort of flaky and light, it turns into a moister and richer sort of flavor. But I think 1-to-1 in terms of the volume of the fat in this recipe will work, but it will create a different finished product. If you don't have a stand mixer, you should just substitute oil and use that, because that way you don't actually have to cream any butter. So that is an option. Next, we're going to add all of the brown sugar to the creamed butter all at once. Okay, next up comes our eggs. And most recipes will ask you to actually put one egg in at a time, and then mix it in with your butter and sugar until it's all nice and fluffy and whatever. But who has that kind of time, honestly? And if you crack your eggs into a separate bowl, then if you make a complete dog's breakfast of one of your eggs and you get a whole bunch of shells in there, at least it's not in your bread mix. So I'd say crack all of your eggs into a bowl and then just do this and pour it all in at once and go, yay, I'm done with the eggs now. And then just wait long enough until all that stuff is mixed together. So that's my tip of the day. All the eggs in at once as well. Okay, so during the mixing process, you're going to want to use a spatula or something like that to scrape down the sides of the bowl, make sure there's no batter ingredients hiding at the bottom. And once you've mixed the eggs, sugar, and butter together, it should look something like this. So kind of, creamy looking. The next and very obvious step is to then add all the pumpkin, which I'm about to do. And if you think you don't like pumpkin, then it just doesn't matter, because this doesn't really taste like pumpkin when it's in its final and glorious state. So there you go. So put all your pumpkin goo in there, and as I said, if you make your own pumpkin, it's actually a very fantastic and delicious way to have this, because fresh pumpkin tastes so much better than canned pumpkin, but it is a arduous process. But if you are going to do it, basically take a pumpkin, take all the seeds out, slice it into bits, just like the butternut squash I showed you in the other recipe, roast it in a pan. Roasting it in butter is actually even better. And then you take it when it's nice and roasted and squishy without burning it, and you put it in here. So Pumpkin in, eggs, sugar, butter, mix. Another shortcut that I like to employ is to basically take your chocolate chips and add it to the wet ingredients. That way they're mixed in and you don't have to over mix your wet and dry ingredients, which can make these quick breads tough and have lots of tunnels and holes in it, not the nice flaky sort of texture that you're looking for. So I just put these in now and then mix them all up as much as I want, and then I can basically take this whole wet ingredient mix and add it to my dry ingredient mix. So while you were not watching, I took all the flour and the baking powder and the cinnamon and the nutmeg and the salt, and I put it all in a bowl like this. And now I'm just going to whisk it all together, both flours that is, and get it ready to mix this with the wet ingredients. So we are going to take our wet ingredients and add them to these dry ingredients. And I've definitely chosen too small a bowl. So I'm going to make a mess, but it's still going to work. So the key to good quick breads is to incorporate the flour and the wet ingredients as well as you can with as few stirring strokes as you can. Okay, so my bigger spoon made up for my too small a bowl. But this is actually pretty much ready to go. As you can see, it's sort of still sticky. There might be some sections where there's a tiny bit of flour, but there's no big chunks of flour in there. So this stuff is ready to go in a loaf pan, like this. I just used some spray oil in the pan. And I'm just going to take my pumpkin loaf and stick it in the pan. Some fun variations on this are, if you can find them, cinnamon chips rather than chocolate chips, or even butterscotch chips would be fantastic in this recipe. And I personally would prefer to have nuts in this. I would put walnuts or something like that because I like that. But again, like I said, I'm making this for the guys at the store. They like their bread unadulterated chocolate. So this is like the classic combination of pumpkin and chocolate chips, which is, you know, it's basically a crowd favorite. So these guys are going to go into the oven. So it's going to take probably an hour. So off we go. And then we wait. So out of the oven come my loaves of pumpkin goodness. And just slice a bit off here so you can see the texture. It's with quick breads, if you slice them while they're still hot, they tend to crumble. So you're better to let them cool off a little bit before you do that. But here you are, a nice, moist, delicious pumpkin bread. If you ask me, you're better off to have the smell of pumpkin bread in your house than chocolate chip cookies if you're trying to sell it, because this stuff smells insane. So good. Thanks for watching Racergirl Television. See you next time. Subscribe to my channel.